Wants to do it. Here we go.
Live.
Right.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Brian Tracy Experience. I'm Dr. Christina Tracy Stein, and I'm here with my two brothers, David and Michael, and of course, the star of the show, Mr. Brian Tracy. And today we are going to talk about the importance of storytelling in life, in relationships, in business, in speaking, right? We do a lot of teaching around speaking and how it's important to use stories to share ideas and points so people understand. So, Dad, why don't you kick us off and tell us
Oh,
what?
we got some people joining, Christina. We got Mohit, Sim,
Hey, look at
CR, and
that.
Dark Brandon.
And
Well,
Paul
welcome, Dark
Kelly.
Brandon. Paul Kelly's joining us from Ireland, right? And we got Thinking Time from Chicago. People are streaming in. Welcome, 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 everyone. We've got a great episode today, as Christina mentioned. It's all about storytelling. And Christina, go kick it off with a question for the Brian.
Yes. Well, I guess so. What I connect to when I think about storytelling is, Dad, when you and I are teaching the Speakers Academy, it's one of the keys that we teach people to be, impactful speakers is that when you make a point or you share a concept, that you want to help people see themselves doing what you're teaching them. And one
Yes.
of the best ways to do that is telling a story of someone else who's done what you're trying to talk to them about. How did what are your thoughts about that and how did you come up with that?
Well, many years ago, I put together a course on accelerated learning, rapid learning, how you can learn and memorize things and keep them forever. And I studied the human brain. And one of the things we know is that the human brain has two parts, if you like, the emotional and the intellectual. The intellectual is activated by facts, data, numbers, things like that. These are all the things you learn in courses in school. The other part of the brain is the emotional brain. It's the relationship brain, and more and more in the last few years, they've come to this conclusion that the feelings that you have an enormous multiplier impact on the ideas. So what we talk about is the windshield wiper method, which is left brain is facts, data, details. Right brain is stories, emotions, and so on. Now, one of the things that everyone wants to be is to be more persuasive. In fact, your ability to be persuasive, to get people to cooperate with you, work with you, are not only the keys to your success in any work, but also in leadership. Leadership, that leaders have the ability to bring people along with them. And
So
one of the ways you do that is with
I just
story.
I want to take us back a little bit. That's like 10, 20, 30,000 years ago when, our ancestors were sitting around a fire. What were they doing? They were likely telling stories, and the best stories persisted and ended up being written down. And then those stories were collected over time, and they are portable lessons. And one of the things that I've seen you, Dad, do several times is you make an analytical point, something kind of cerebral, an intellectual thing, and everybody's like, huh? And then you go, let me tell you a story. And everybody leans forward. And then you're able to deliver a highly intellectual or analytical point in a very memorable story. And you've done that many, many times. Do you have like a favorite story or just one that pops into your mind at this moment?
Well, I have many. One of the things that I try to encourage people to think about is that they can do much, much better than they're doing today if they simply learn how. And so one of the stories that I start off with, I say, what is your most valuable asset? What your most valuable asset? And I let them sit with it. Now, there's a very important point. The person who asks questions has control. The person who asks questions has control. The person answering the questions is controlled by the person asking the questions. So one of the keys to persuasion is to ask people questions. Ask them about themselves and their work, their progress, and their opinions and their ideas, and nod and smile. When you nod and smile, it means that you're taking it in. You're taking it in. So be an active listener And it's quite astonishing. People will tell you the most amazing things, interesting things, fascinating things, things that you hadn't even thought of. But if you ask, the great majority of people think that to be persuasive, you have to be a fast talker. No, to be persuasive, you have to be a good questioner. And,
Mm.
uh, and then you use stories to reinforce. If you give a talk, if I give a talk to an audience, and I will give examples throughout the day, within 24 hours, everyone in the audience will have forgotten all of the facts and details, but they will remember the stories for 5 years, 10 years. Sometimes they'll remember stories that they heard 25 years ago. They
Have
still,
you, Dad? Have you've heard of Joseph Campbell, right? The hero with 1,000 faces.
yes,
So he's got an interesting construct, and basically he's a comparative mythologist who went back and analyzed all of these mythologies from every religion, and essentially figured out that there's a very big formula. It's like a formulaic kind of sequence of events, and each element is kind of a critical element into this what he called the hero's journey. And I think about this a lot, and I'll just briefly describe. But everybody
Hey, Mike.
starts out, yeah,
I was gonna say, can I just show something real quick from your book?
yeah. Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so at the very top of that is the globe, and that's where everyone starts out before they go on their hero's journey. And at that moment, you're kind of complacent, and you don't want to change. And then you get what they call a call to adventure. Somebody comes up and says, "Hey, Michael, you should be a speaker," or "Hey, David, you should start a business." And you go, "No, no, no." You refuse. You refuse the call to adventure. You say, "It's not for me. I'm not smart enough. I'm not, strong enough. I don't have enough time." And then it usually takes the intervention of a mentor to come in and say, "You know what? You are good enough. You are smart enough. You can do it." And then you finally take your first big step and you cross that threshold into the new world. And I won't go into the whole thing. You can always buy my book if you want to read about it, or Joseph Campbell's book. Uh, and what's cool about that process is if you've ever read a novel or watched a movie, and at the end of the movie or the novel, you have this feeling like, oh, that's it. Like it didn't like wrap it all up. It's because it's missing one core element. And to go back to what you do, Dad, with your windshield wiper method, is you take these points and then you give the audience a visual where they envision themselves in the story,
yes.
overcoming the challenge and getting the benefit of overcoming that challenge. And it sticks. They walk away remembering that for a lifetime.
Which I also think has to do with it's the in a simple way, right? You're saying, here you were in the beginning. Here was your obstacle or challenge. This is the transformation you went through, and here's where you are at the end. So people relate to this hitting an obstacle, having a challenge they have to overcome, going through some transformation physically, emotionally, mentally, and arriving in a new version of themselves. So when you're speaking, you're trying to convince people to connect to the new version, and you show them how to get there.
You're having them visualize the end results or the end state, not all the work that's going to go into it.
Yeah, it's not the plane, it's the destination.
See, one of the rules that's with regard to stories is that people, unless there's an emotion attached to a thought, it won't be remembered. When you attach a story to someone who we call it pre and post, before they did this sort of thing, they got this result. As a result of doing this, they got that result. Which would you like, this or that? If you want that, this is what they did. And so when you tell stories, sometimes people will try it and it won't work, but they'll remember the story that somebody else tried it and it didn't work the first time or the second time or the third time.
Well, speaking of stories, Tosh and I were just talking about your wedding speech at our wedding, and there was some really cool like visuals. Like one of the best visuals was that you said, Tosh came into our lives like smoke. She was nowhere, and then she was everywhere. It was such a beautiful way of describing it, and that visual stuck. I mean, I remember that since that speech. The other funny little anecdote that you said was you're talking about a couple who got married, and he said, I offer you my honor. And she said, I honor your offer. And he goes, I offer you my honor. And she goes, I honor your offer. And then you said, and it was offer and honor all night.
Oh,
It's just such a, but like, again, memorable. It's a beautiful way of getting people to laugh, lightening the mood. And so there's all these really cool elements in storytelling that cause the person to have that emotive response.
Now,
And
I listened to a very famous speaker that everybody knows, and he went up and he gave this talk, and it was about 12 to 15 minutes, and it was a story. And he talked about this and talked about that, and he walked all over the stage and pumped his arms and everything else. And at the end of it, he came back from the stage, and I said, "What was that story about?" He said, "It really doesn't matter. I just use it to fill time. I had 12 minutes between the end of my seminar and lunchtime, so I just used it to fill time." The reason I tell you that story is because an enormous number of speakers will tell stories just to fill time, or they'll tell a story because they thought it was a cute story. So here's a cute story that my father told me, my friend told me, and so on. And people will say, "Well, how is it relevant to what you're saying?" "Oh, it isn't, but it's entertaining because it's just an interesting story." No, it's really important that if you do tell a story, be very deliberate that this story, the reason I'm telling you this story is because, in other words, make it so simple and clear that a child, Einstein used to say that you should be able to explain a concept to a 6-year-old child, and that child should be able to turn and explain the same concept to another 6-year-old child. And if you can't do that, it means your thinking is too complicated. And so,
so I agree with everything you just said. I wanted to make one small point of disagreement. So absolutely, a story should serve a purpose. Like if you're doing something, talking about time management or sales or psychology, and you want to use a story to emphasize a point, the thing is, there's a lot of people interested in you and your life. And so they want to see some sort of like autobiography or something biographical on you. In that case, you don't have to tie it back to lessons. You can just tell them your story. And I know
yes.
you're working on something. So
Well, I've written 3 books on my early travels from Vancouver, British Columbia to Johannesburg, 17,000 miles, and I've written 3 books that explain the 3 phases. And one of the things that I've always done is my personality is I look for the lessons that I can learn from each experience. And so, in my first book called Many Miles to Go, uh, what I do is I explain this is what happened.
that's awesome.
how did you have that queued up, David?
I just had a feeling we were going to go
All
there.
the
Sorry.
pile of books in front of you, and you're like,
There's only 2. It's just Michael's and this one. Because this is the one that reminds me of all the storytelling from Dad.
nice.
Go ahead, Dad.
The thing is that people will remember you, your personality, your intelligence. If you want to be successful in business, which we keep coming back to, is each person has a responsibility to fulfill their potential financially. You want to reach the point where you never worry about money again. And to be persuasive, there's nothing that persuades people to buy your product or service more than testimonials. Where we tell a story about a person who was reluctant and hesitant and finally decided to go ahead. And this is what happened to her. This is what happened. This is what this person said to me afterwards, after they overcame their reluctance to accept my offer. And then they started to use it. This is the story they told. People will remember the story and considering buying from you for the same reason.
I was
Well, I also think that sometimes people don't believe things are possible, right? You hear an idea or a concept, you get taught something, and it's hard to imagine yourself being able to apply that to your life. So when you hear from another person that they have tried it or they've gone through an experience, not only do you do you relate to that person who might be similar to you, right? And obviously, like when you, like if I hear a story of a woman who has kids who does something, I'm going to relate more to her than a single man, so the more I connect to the character of the story, the more emotionally I relate to her, the more I'm going to believe it's possible for me. And I think that makes it more memorable, right? I think part of it, it's like that quote from Maya Angelou, people will forget what you did, people will forget what you said, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. So the stories, right? We want to tell stories that actually like inspire or motivate people or give them, new hope in some way. Those are the feelings you're wanting to inspire.
Okay,
That's
here's in order to be successful, we have to motivate other people to help us. From the very beginning, your business, your success only grows when you get an assistant who can take care of the little stuff so that you can spend more time doing higher priced, more valuable things. Okay, so that's been, and since you want to be more persuasive, and this is the key to your success. We said earlier that your most valuable single asset is your earning ability. It's your ability to earn money. And not only that, it's your ability to earn more and more and more. And I spun around in circles for years in my early 20s. And I worked on farms and I worked on ships and I worked at sleeping on the hay in the farmer's barn during the harvest. And I finally started asking myself, why is it that some people are more successful than others? And I eventually couldn't find any other job except selling from door to door. So I started doing that, and I did a terrible job of it because I hadn't learned how. So the bottom line for success in any field is study the craft, resolve to become better and better, read an hour every day, try practice the new things that you learn. And then when you become a speaker, if you do, or even if you just influence people as individuals, you say, this is what happened to me. This is what happened to me. When I started off, I was here, and this is what happened to me when I learned and applied these new ideas. So
I
when
was.
you tell a story, what you do is you persuade them that I can do this. I can do this. I can do it as well. And
So
that's
okay. I want to tie this back to what Christine was saying, and I want to also make just a quick point. I've read several authors, and essentially what it comes down to is your brand, right? Is the story, right? It's like when people buy a brand, they don't necessarily buy just a logo.
right.
What they're buying is the entire narrative behind your company, and then as components of that narrative, you have these avatars. Like Christine, what you were saying, you only buy things, or you tend to buy things from people you relate to or stories you relate to.
Yes.
So
I think you have more of an emotional connection to things you can relate to, for sure.
So in marketing, you create avatars. You go, what sort of people buy my products, and then what stories do I need to create for each one of these people, so that they feel connected to my brand.
Yes.
And then that gets you over that initial hurdle of influencing and persuading them to buy your product.
Here's another point with regard to persuasion, and that is that people are persuaded when you appeal to their emotions. There's a point I was going to make there. Um, it'll come back to me in a second. But again, the veracity or the truth of what you say is only demonstrated by the successes that other people have had. And all of science, of course, is based on infinitesimal fractions of changes or improvements that you can make. But it's all provable. So when you tell a story, basically that's proof that this other person can enjoy the same results and benefits that someone else did. And so the most successful companies are constantly telling success stories. And one last point. That's what I was going to say. Is the great key to influencing other people is to make other people feel important. Now, this is what Dale Carnegie said in his wonderful book. Make others feel important. How do you make others feel important? You ask them questions and listen intently to the answers. Many speakers that I've seen they will ask a question rhetorically, and then they just go on talking. So they don't even listen to the other person's feedback. But when you ask a person a question and lean and listen closely to their answer, they feel more important. They feel more valuable. And as a result, they like you more. They're more willing to be involved with you and buy from you and to be associated with you, and even especially to hire you. Uh, I used to do courses on how to hire, how to fire. I wrote books all over the world in 50 languages. And one of them, and how to hire and how to fire, is to ask a lot of questions. And if you don't feel good about that person, discontinue it.
Dad, do you have a favorite question?
Well, one of the two questions which I always like is, if you could wave a magic wand and achieve any one goal in life, which one goal would be the most important? Which one goal would help you the most? And the second question I ask, if your life is perfect sometime in the future, how would it be different from today? How would it be different? And think about that. And the more you think about it, and then if you're asking another person at a social gathering or work this question, then you ask, well, what would, if you know what it is, what could you do starting today to be able to achieve that goal, to make that change, to
Can I
become
suggest, Dad? I mean, as you're saying that, since that's your favorite question, what if, we have a lot of listeners right now on lots of different platforms. And so if you were to think about what is the one goal that would have the greatest impact on your life right now, we would love to hear that. So please think about that question and put it in the chat, because we would love to hear from all of you. What one goal could you achieve, or if you were to achieve, would have the biggest impact on your life right now?
and we'll come back to this and answer it, because sometimes you will have an insight and you ask a question and it turns on the light in somebody else's mind and mine, and you can save yourself 5 years of hard work with one great insight that you hadn't had before.
Dad, there's another thing you say. You're talking about like what one goal, but one quote from you that's one of my favorites is, "What dream would you dare to dream if you knew you would not fail?"
Yes.
Yeah, like that to me is it's so liberating to consider a guaranteed win. And maybe that's a better question for you guys that are listening is, what is one dream you would dare to dream if you knew you would not fail? One thing you could just have or be or do in your life and it was guaranteed.
Yeah, that's like the first part of psychology of achievement is you have to be able to visualize what you want, and then if you can't see it clearly in your mind, then you can't achieve it. So, dream. Just like Christina said, dream big dreams. The other question that David mentioned recently is, how do you mean exactly? How do you mean exactly? I feel like that is like a sleeper cell question. It's such a beautiful question because it digs deep. It allows them to get really specific. And we know in psychology that if you can listen to somebody for 20 minutes without interruption, the person that is doing the talking, their perception of you as the listener basically goes through the roof. Like, you become more attractive, you become smarter, you become just all these positive traits and qualities, and you're not really saying anything. You're just listening. You're just validating and just very carefully listening to every word they're saying. And it's a wonderful way to build rapport with people and learn a lot about them at the same time.
I was gonna bring that up with Christina as it pertains to dating, right? Because on a first date, shouldn't you be asking questions 80% of the time, or 20% talking, 80% listening? Isn't that how you're perceived as more attractive on a first date, Christina?
Well, I think you should definitely be curious. I don't have the percentages, but yes. I mean, look, what Michael's saying is true. Like, when you walk away from an interaction with someone, they tend to be more interesting, or you feel more connected to them because if they've asked you questions and you've shared all this information about yourself, you're sort of more vulnerable and open to this person who now knows all of this about you. And so it creates that connection. And I definitely think it's the best way to build a relationship on a first date is to ask questions and be curious and be open. Right now, I'll say on a side note, like I know people are looking for red flags with people with dating and asking questions, but again, people are not perfect. So it's good to be curious and to learn about people and to understand what their stories are so that you can connect in a different way. But yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a good tie back because the theme is storytelling, right? And every single person has their own story, and that's something that you guys teach in Speakers Academy, the MOS, like my own story. And so you do kind of want to have to reflect and think about what is your own story, like what is your background, what are the composition of experiences that make you you, and to be able to communicate that efficiently to somebody really helps them get to know you better. So
Well,
maybe that's something everybody in
I,
the audience.
I read a wonderful description of success, which I really like, and it says, is that all great successes are preceded by failure, 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 and then great success. And one of the things that I've learned is that there's a certain number of lessons that you must learn in order to achieve a goal, let's say a financial or business goal. There's a certain amount of lessons you must learn. And you can only learn the lessons by failing and picking yourself up and saying, what did I learn from this experience? And you never know how many lessons you are away from the breakthrough. And this is really important. You just must confidently believe that if you keep pushing forward, you will find an opportunity. You will find an opportunity to do this or do that or do something else. Most of what you try will not work the first time. Sometimes it won't work for the first few times. That's why most new businesses go broke very quickly because that person has no experience with failure and finances and sales and marketing and staff and everything else. So it's really important that you learn from every mistake. And the way you persuade people is ask them questions and listen intently to the answers.
Hey, Dad, I have a question for you. How many books have you written?
94,
And
90, 96, actually.
and of those books, they're all nonfiction books.
Yes.
And so one question I have, and one question I've gotten from a lot of your fans over the years is, have you ever thought about writing a fiction book?
Yes, I have. And
And if you were to write a fiction book, have you had some ideas about what it might be about?
it's going to be an adventuresome book with a hero who will look very much like me, uh, and a story. And I haven't finalized it all yet, but I will. My friends here online will be the first to know.
I think we're all looking forward to that one.
You don't want to tell me any more about it. You do have this idea.
Yeah, well, as I flesh it out more,
And what about a Brian Tracy autobiography? That would be an interesting story.
well, yes. Let me think about that.
Well, yeah, I think maybe we could hire a professional biographer and just to go and pull in all these primary sources because you've written so many things over the years and put it together in some really cool story would be like helpful too. We could try that. So just to go back with Ted, you mentioned failure, right? Failure after failure after failure. People don't believe stories where the character isn't subject to some sort of adversity. They're not having challenges. They're not failing. They don't have enemies. Like it's almost like you need all that conflict,
Yes,
all of that adversity to have a believable story in the first place.
the hero.
And you see in
The
both,
hero, right?
both
Well,
fiction
I
and
would
non.
even say, Michael, to take that even further, is that people don't trust people who are not don't show some sign of imperfection or vulnerability, right? If you are perfect and you achieve everything perfectly, it's not believable. You can't trust it. You don't connect to it. So because nobody is perfect, so even the adversity of a story of like, overcoming a challenge shows that it's not perfect, and then it becomes more real and believable.
Oh, and there's a massive swing towards being authentic, like being an authentic human being. Like you can't. I mean, even when it comes to like videos on social media, if it's overproduced, it makes it seem inauthentic or fake. It's almost like people want you to like make mistakes, and say things and stutter, and just because it reminds people that you are actually a real person. If I was like an AI right now, I wouldn't stutter, I wouldn't have any, bridge words. I wouldn't say I'd make every point perfectly. I'd articulate every word. So there is something to be said for a desire, an extreme desire, more so now than at any time in human history, for authenticity.
Yes, well,
Which comes from self-awareness. Go ahead, Dad. What were you going to say?
well, the people used to tell me, I've heard it hundreds of times. They come up to me at the break in a seminar, and they said, "I had no idea that you didn't graduate from high school. I had no idea that you didn't. I thought you came from a very successful home. 'Cause here you are, up in front of the audience, wearing expensive clothes, talking to 1,000 people. I sort of assumed that you just were born like that, and they don't realize that every person who is successful was a massive failure before, and they kept asking themselves, "What can I learn from this to enable me to be better next time?" When you guys we all had our family together, always ask you the question, "What did you learn? What did you learn?" And you can always change your mind. Those are my two favorites.
Yeah. The freedom to change your mind.
Yeah.
That's actually, I mean, it's something that I'm trying to teach my kids too, because especially my oldest gets really stuck, and she's pretty like stubborn, and she'll want to stick through something. But once you give them the freedom to change their mind, they get to rethink, kind of like your zero-based thinking formula,
Yes.
right? If I knew then what I know now, would I do it again the same way? Would I make the same decisions? Would I take the same actions?
That is a great question. And the key indicator is always stress. When you feel stress, you feel angry, you feel frustrated, you feel worried, you don't feel like you're making any progress. That's nature's way of telling you, stop, time out. It means you're obviously on the wrong track. Because if you're on the right track, you'll be happy. You'll have energy. You'll be cheerful. There's the little old saying that says, in poker, the the losers swear and say, "Shut up and deal," whereas the winners just say, "Let's play some more cards." So the uh, the winners are always smiling and cheerful, and the losers are always complaining. So, by the way, there's a wonderful one-liner that says, "People don't care about your problems." The 80-20 rule applies that about 80% of people don't really care about your problems. They don't want to hear about them. And the other 20% are kind of glad that you've got the problems in the first place.
Yeah, on the topic of stress, when it comes to, you know, maybe feeling like you're on the wrong path, when you're failing over and over again before you finally succeed, you can feel a tremendous amount of stress in that situation too. So,
Yes.
how do you teach your audience and your clients the difference between identifying whether you're on the wrong path or whether you're just feeling the natural stresses of all the failures before you succeed? Because a lot of people have a hard time with that. Is there
Well, what Michael just said is really important. Is
Yeah.
that if I was not now doing this, or if I was not now doing this, would I start doing it again today? If I was not now in this job, this profession, in this relationship, if I was not now living in this neighborhood, whatever it happens to be,
I,
listen, listen to yourself and trust yourself, and the answers are all within you.
I heard a good analogy. It was, making a decision and choosing a path is like deciding to go and like hike up a mountain, right? And sometimes you get halfway up that mountain and you hit just a sheer wall of rock.
Yes.
And so you get out your pickaxes and your ropes and you start using carbiners and, creating this like way to get up to the mountain, where sometimes it would just be better just go back down and pick a different path, and you get up to the mountaintop faster.
Right.
But very few people aren't willing to go back down to the bottom and pick a new path, because they've already made some progress. And so they're like, oh, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay here and tough it out. Even though if they went back down to the bottom, they chose a different path with switchbacks, they made it to the top in half the time. It's just that willingness to stay. Okay, I probably made a mistake. I'd have to go back down to the bottom of the mountain and start over again.
Yeah, and be willing to admit it. But what you do is you recognize that every failure precedes success. So every time you have a setback, it's almost like there's a great power in the universe that's training you in order to be successful. And the only way that you will learn, you say, is if you get a whack in the head. If you don't get a whack in the head, you can keep talking to yourself and convincing yourself that you're doing all the right things. So be open to the fact, the possibility, I could be wrong. And what you just said, that's really important. If I was not now doing this way, would I start? If the answer is no, there's a wonderful Chinese poem or saying that says, the person who's on the wrong path and turns around and goes back is making more progress faster toward their goals than the person who keeps pushing on the road that's not working. So be open to that. Human beings, according to Darwin, have this tendency toward momentum. It's called the momentum theory of success. Is once they get going, they just want to keep going in the same direction. And if you point out to them, you're on the wrong road, they say, yes, we're making great time.
But so, Dad, here's the question, though, to go along with what David was saying, right? Because, you get out what you put in. So if you're going to achieve great success, you're going to have to put in a lot of time and effort and energy to achieve great things. And sometimes along that road of effort, you hit walls, you feel overwhelmed, you feel like you're stressed out and it doesn't feel good and you're not happy with the situation. So there are times where you're going to hit that moment or that wall and need to keep going because it's a natural part of your progress. Or you're going to hit that wall and realize that it's the wrong direction. How do you know the difference? How do you determine if it's just you've got to have the grit and you've got to work hard and you just got to get through the obstacle or the challenge, or, hey, this is the wrong road, I need to turn around?
Well, again, you have to trust yourself. David's wife, Paula, attended this 3-day SON course a few months ago. And she told us that after 3 days of working with these very talented people, the conclusion, I said, what did you learn? She said, trust yourself, listen to yourself, and sit quietly. It's one of the greatest discoveries of human history is that if you sit quietly for 30 minutes, not 25. It has to be 26 minutes, 27. You sit quietly for 30 minutes on your porch or somewhere else, is that your mind will start to clear like clouds dissipating, and you'll start to get ideas and answers to all your biggest problems.
The superconscious mind.
The superconscious. There was a statement by one of the great French writers. He said that most people have never sat alone with themselves in a room for their entire lives. Aside from going to bed, they have not sat quietly by themselves and just thought a little bit about who they are and what they really want. So sometimes there's a saying that says to go faster, go slower. To go faster, go slower. Sit and think quietly and just allow the silence. It's called going into the silence. You go into the silence and sit quietly.
Use that a lot with my little kids. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast when they're going through things. And it's
that's cool.
Apply it to everything.
Wait, say that again.
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah, that's cool.
Sometimes to go faster, you have to slow down because you rush through things.
Yeah.
So we were speaking of goal achievement. There is one thing that's interesting about achieving a goal that you set for yourself. because when you do get to that place, you're no longer the same person. So this ties back to this whole idea: is like, is there a destination? Is there a moment where you can say, okay, I'm all done. I've achieved all my goals. I'm finished now. I can relax. Is that moment ever really going to come for anyone?
No, you never. Well, that's not true. Probably 80% of people have reached that point one way or another. But the fact is that your job throughout your life is just to become everything that you're capable of becoming. Now, that sounds hokey, but it's really true. And whatever you've accomplished up to now, what you can accomplish in the future is vastly greater. I've written 96 books. I have 5 books under contract. I've got calls today from publishers who say, "Where's the book? Where's the book?" And another publisher wants another book that I've suggested to them. It is amazing, and I will have 101 books by the end of next year.
So going back to stories, one of the stories that just occurred to me is the story that ends with just one more at the place next door.
Yes, that is a great story. You want me to tell the story?
Yeah, I would love that.
It's a story about a salesman. He's working harder in the business, but he's not making any sales, and he's frustrated. He doesn't have enough money, and he's thinking about quitting. And he gets an appointment halfway across town, and he said, "Well, what I'll do is I'll call on this last appointment, and if it's not successful, I'll give up and try something different." So he drives all the way across town and goes in to see the store owner. It's a large store, and he's talking to him about his products. And the store owner says, I don't think I'm in the market for your product or service right now, but thanks for coming. Keep in touch, which is what customers say. That keep in touch means goodbye forever. So he walks out and he said, "That's it." He said, "That's it. I've come all the way over town and didn't get a sale or an appointment of the lead to a sale." He said, "The heck with it." And then he notices in this same shopping area, there's another big store. And he thought, well, I'm not going to continue. I'm quitting, but I might as well call on this other store before I go back to the office. So he goes in, he asks for the owner, the manager. The owner and manager needs exactly what he's talking. He makes a big sale. Everybody's happy, high-fiving. They share telephone numbers to socialize. And he walks out, and he's made a sale and a big chunk of commission. And so he made this testimonial to himself. From now on, I will always make one stop more on the door next door, the store next door. I'll take one stop more on the store next door. And the philosophy of that means that you never quit. It never occurs to you to quit. You'll try something different. You'll go somewhere different. You'll do all kinds of things. The idea of quitting is impossible. It does not exist. The only question is, how can I do it differently and better next time?
There's no traffic on the extra mile.
There's no traffic on the extra mile. And that's what Napoleon Hill said, is that there's no traffic on the extra mile. But he also said that always do more than you're paid for. Always do more than you're paid for. It's become a big issue today. Lots of articles on it. There's a lot of young people who just finished their schooling or their childhood, and they're getting their first job, and they're thinking about retiring. Mm-hmm. They're complaining about having to come to work every day, and they like to stay at work and work on their computer and phone their friends and so on. And they're saying, no, you have to come to work. If you don't come to work, you'll be fired. And they'll say, like little children, "That's not fair. That's not fair." Well, I've got news for you. Life is not fair. Life is not fair. Your job is to be one of the most successful people in your world. And how you do that, it's like ratcheting up a car. It's got a flat tire. Is you learn something new and apply it. Learn and apply. Learn and practice. Learn and do. Excuse me. And nothing can stop you from getting better and better and better and getting more and more results. And every person I've ever spoken to in 50 years of studying success has had the same experience. Everybody gets fail, 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 massive success. And then the last thing that says, you were just lucky. You you worked hard for X number of weeks, months, years to break through. And
Well, one of
you
the things that you frequently said is, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
exactly. That's one of the great discoveries.
Well,
Is
isn't that the whole, you get out what you put in? The harder you work, the more you get out, whether it's personal satisfaction or actual success.
But
You,
well,
but if you think about getting stuff out of your work, it's probably more like a bell curve,
you
um, or maybe even like where you're working a lot in the beginning and you're not seeing a lot of results, and then only towards the end do you start to get the maximum benefit.
yeah. And most people don't succeed. Most people make most of their money in their 50s. If they spend years and years working their way up,
yeah,
ratcheting it up, learning more, and so on. And then they start to earn much more than they're spending, and they start to save that and to invest that and to put it away and grow it over time. And I met so many people who've come to this country from Russia or from Africa or South America or from Asia, and they come here with nothing, no money, no connections, sometimes no language skills, and after 5 years, a big success. They're doing great. I could tell you so many wonderful stories. The bottom line is there's really no limits except the limits you place on yourself with
yeah,
your thinking. And when you say, I can do anything I put my mind to, it's just a matter of time. It's like that one little story where the the little boys asked, can you play a musical instrument? He said, I don't know. I haven't tried yet.
Yeah.
It's, it's a great one liner. I don't know. I haven't tried yet. Well, there's nothing that you can't do if you apply yourself. And so the greatest word of all is clarity, is exactly what do you want to accomplish in a week, a month, a year? How much do you want to earn? Where do you want to be in your field? And so on. Um, I've worked with the $1 million Roundtable, the insurance industry's top 200,000 salespeople worldwide. And these people earn an enormous amount. They all started off frustrated. They all started off knocking on doors and making phone calls and sending emails. They all started off frustrated, living at home and in their mother's basement and so on. But they just kept on keeping on and they got a little bit better. Now, when I took an MBA at the University of Alberta, one of the courses that you had to take was called probability theory. And you've heard me talk about this. But probability theory goes back about 300 years, and it starts off with some of the most brilliant people. A monk, a Swiss monk at that time, came up with the ideas that there is a probability that everything can happen. And you can calculate these probabilities with tremendous accuracy. And you can improve the probabilities by doing more of the things that are destined to be more successful, faster, and easier. And so the whole idea of probabilities changed the entire world. All medicine, all science, all business, all invention, all engineering is based on probabilities. What are the probabilities that something will happen in a certain way? And you can influence those probabilities. That's really exciting. So I'll say, for example, one of the stories I always tell, I say, before we begin, 1,000 people, I say, how many people here would like to double their income in the weeks and months ahead? And everybody stops. They all raise their hand. Everybody wants to double their income. So then I play with them a little bit and I say, well, that's good because I have a couple of methods to help you double your income, which I'll share with you over the course of the day. So let's begin. And they all go, whoa. The whole audience goes, whoa. We want to hear it now. If there's a way to double your income, we want to hear it now. Well, so I said, well, there's a law called the law of probabilities, and you can calculate probabilities in several different ways. You have to use differential calculus. You have to have advanced instructor, I needed a tutor to take probability theory. And they say, so you, there's a probability that everything will happen. I say, here's the deal. The average professional salesperson in this room, statistically, will make 2 new calls on new prospects each day. Some will make more and some will make less. I know some people who don't make 2 new calls in a week, but the average person is making 2 new calls a day. So let's say that you are average, okay? You see what we're doing? I'm showing this story and we're weaving it in and out. The most important thing is if you ask a question, pause and wait and let them think about the question and even say to them out loud what the answer is. I say, what light do you stop on and what light do you go? People automatically answer the question. It's almost like a switchblade. They cannot not answer a simple question. So you can control. They say the person who asks questions has control. The person who asks questions has control. The person who's answering the questions is controlled by the person asking the questions. Your job is to be in control of the conversation. And when you ask questions and listen closely to the answers, and then nod and smile and use what David said, how do you mean exactly? That's an interesting point of view. How do you mean? Never argue or debate with people because that makes them feel unimportant. Always say, that's a really great idea. Oh, how did you come to that? How do you do that?
Yes.
A lot of times when people ask a question, they already sort of know the answer. I mean, one of the things that you help me is when people ask a question, you sort of just rephrase the question back to them and get them thinking about their own question. And then they, 60, 70% of the time, they have the answer already.
Yeah.
They just needed an ear to reflect it back, or a mirror. Christina, you've dealt with a lot of that too, I'm sure.
David, that's an excellent point, because so many people ask questions that they want to be asked themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, but also I would say, since we're talking about authenticity and stories and connection, that people also know if you ask them a question that you don't actually want the answer to, right? Like, how many times do people say, how are you? Hi, how's it going? And they don't genuinely want to know. So I would say, don't ask questions that you don't actually want answers to, because people are smart enough to know when you're just, what would you say, Dad, blowing smoke up their ass?
Well, to come full circle to persuasive ability, there's nothing that persuades more than stories. And if you could tell a story about someone pre and post, before they did not have this goal, this income, this achievement, this business, and now they do, pre and post. And how do they get from here to there? Is they did this. And you tell the story about how people went by changing their behavior to getting different, better, faster, easier results.
Yep.
One thing you mentioned, Mike, too, is this whole concept of getting there, like getting to this point where you can sit back and say, it's complete. I made it. I'm successful. And it's completely illusory, because there is no there. When you get there, there's always going to be another goalpost in the future. And
Yes.
if you can train your mind to accept that there will never be a there, then you can really start to sort of find satisfaction in the little wins and the little
or David, just enjoy the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Enjoy the present moment as it's happening, instead of always.
I mean, how many people listening say, "I'll be happy when," and then it's this goal in the future. And when you get to that goal, are you really happy? Are you sitting back and your life's complete, or is there just another thing that you need to keep doing?
100% agree, David. That's so true.
But it's also probably not. It's not necessarily having something that gives you joy. It's the feeling of something that gives you joy, right? Sure. Going back to like the stories and connecting. So it's more about on a daily basis, like, how do you feel in your life? Do you feel happy? Do you feel connected to the people around you?
Well, yeah. So David, this goes back to like Buddha's like cessation of suffering, where it's like you have this thing. It's like, I'm going to be so happy when my kids graduate from college, right? Like, that's the goal. Like, I want my kids to graduate from college. And you just think about this all the time. I can't wait. They're going through high school. I can't wait. And then they finally graduate from college, and it's supposed to be the happiest moment. but they immediately start crying. And it's like not happy tears. What it is, it's like a realization that that moment is already passing and it's already gone. And they've looked past the moment to when it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And they're mourning the loss of this thing that they built up in their minds instead of just enjoying the moment as it was happening.
A lot of people feel that way about retirement too, right? I'll be so happy when I finally retire. And then when they finally retire, they lose their minds because they don't have something to occupy their time anymore. It's illusory. You have to get off of that, I think. It's really hard to get off of it, but when you do, you can really find happiness.
There was a great writer when I was growing up who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, and his name was Lawrence Durrell. And he wrote 4 books called the Alexandria Quartet from Alexandria. And he was quoted by an enormous number of people. One of the quotes that I really like, he said that, "I do not write for those who have never asked themselves, when does real life begin? When does real life begin? And you can tell when you're dedicated to real life because you breathe in, you breathe out, and you feel happy. You just feel happy. You feel the sense of forward movement or creating the kind of life and world that you want. And it just makes you genuinely happy. But if you're blocked, if you're frustrated, if you can't make any progress, that makes you angry and depressed, and you question yourself and your ability and so on. So it's really important that you have clear written goals with plans to accomplish them, and you work on them every day.
How often do you go back and review those written goals, Dad? Is that something that you do every month, every day, every year?
Every day. Here's my goal book right here. And every day I sit and write my 10 most important goals. And the impact of that over time is quite extraordinary. If you do not know what it is you want to accomplish, then you will just go around in circles. And 80% of people, remember, the danger is great. 80% of people are not really making very much progress. They are in the lower number of people in terms of income. Your job is to be in the top 20%. People in the top 20% earn over time an average of about 10 times, according to Harvard, 10 times the average person earns. Your job is to say, I'm going to be in the top 10%. And then nothing can stop you. And this is something I do with my audiences. I say, there's nothing that can stop you from joining the top 10 or 20%, increasing your own automatic. Nothing, no one. And I said, wait a minute. There is one person who can stop you from being a big success in life. One person. I said, and who would that be? Who would that be? You've got 1,000 people, even 2,000, and everybody's quiet, and they all go like this. Me. I'm the only one who can stop me. I'm the only one who can hold me back from accomplishing it. So that means if you don't hold yourself back, nobody else will. Because here's the tragedy: is people don't care that much about whether you're successful or not. They think about themselves.
They're not thinking about you as much as you think they are.
I think that's a beautiful point to wrap up this episode.
Yes.
It was a beautiful, very eloquent way of putting it, Dad. I think you're getting a lot of love in the comments too.
Okay, there's two points. By the way, hello, Marek, my friend from Poland. But please, if they would like to hear about any subject, please put it in the comments, and it will come to me. And if you would like to learn about any other subject, then please put it in the comments. Now, we may not operate and respond to each comment, but we can incorporate your questions and your concerns into the next podcast that we do. So please help us. Tell us what.
If there's a theme you want us to talk about for the full hour, throw it in the comments. If everybody's commenting on this one theme, then that's what we'll talk about.
Yeah, we meticulously go through all the comments, so it will be read and it will be paid attention to, and we'll try to address it on the next episode of the Brian Tracy Experience.
And I will just say really fast, I'm new to social media. I would love your support. So if you can follow me at Dr. Christina Tracy Stein on Instagram or Facebook. I would so greatly appreciate it. And I also answer some of these questions there that we don't necessarily get to here. So just want to put that out there and really appreciate it.
Wonderful. That's
Awesome.
cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
Do you know who the most successful and happy people?
Sorry. Good.
They're the hustlers. They're the hustlers, like all the people watching this. These are the people who make things happen. They get busy.
Fail faster to succeed sooner. Right?
Exactly. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody,
Love you guys.
see you next time. Okay.
See you later.
Thank you.